If you know me, I do like a bargain. So on a whim, I bought this all-in-one Dell PC. And the main reason I bought this was this one feature. You can rotate the screen from the stand. And with the shortcut button, you can set it to rotate with a click of a button. This video is sponsored by PCBWay, but more on that later. The specs were lacking, so I've decided to give it 32 gigs of RAM in place of the 8 gig one. And also gave it additional storage of 1 TB on top of the 256 gig it was installed with. So what do you do with the rotating screen, you ask? You encase it inside an arcade case, of course. Here I'm designing and working out the measurements of the PC and how big the case should be. The idea is to also include a hidden keyboard and mouse as well as joysticks inside the case. Once done, I headed down to my closest DIY centre to buy some MDF boards. We were also replacing my daughter's bed, so I decided to use the wood for the framing. So on to measuring and drawing and cutting out the case. Before I get bombarded with complaints about how I'm cutting things wrong or not building the arcade case correctly, I want to preface that I'm not great at woodworking. I traced the other side of the case, which saved me from measuring again. Once I have these sides cut, it was time to add some framing. This is from my daughter's bed, which was really handy as it meant I didn't have to spend money on additional wood. I first began measuring out and cutting each side, and then using glue to tack them down to get it in place. I also made sure that each side was the thickness of the MDF board. Here I'm cutting the rest of the sides of the arcades and making sure I don't waste much of the MDF as I can. So throughout these clips, you're going to see a lot of inconsistency with the lighting. To secure the framing a bit more, here I'm screwing it down with some wood screws. You may also have noticed that I replaced it with some plastic bracket. This should hopefully give more strength as it will be carrying a lot of weight from the PC's base. I then used some of the bed frame as a bigger bracket for a large piece of wood to sit on. I then used some corner brackets to reinforce the wood as well. And this is where I got a little worried. The space for the keyboard slider is very tight and I weren't sure whether the joysticks had enough space to fit inside along with the board that the PC would sit on. The next part, I forgot to record the assembly, but at this point I wanted to make sure that everything measured up before I decide to redesign it all. But spoiler alert, everything worked out okay. Next up was assembling the keyboard tray. Having a quick test fit, I was pretty positive this will be fine. And if I'm honest with you, I was pretty chuffed at myself that this worked as I wanted to. So after assembling the pieces, I realised that to secure the base of the PC, I would need to fill these gaps, which I thought was required when you rotate the PC screen, but it actually was just enough space. So I filled the gap with a scrap piece of MDF and filled the holes with some wood filler. I added 2 small pieces of wood on either side, then another piece of wood on top of the smaller pieces to secure the base. Then lastly, one more piece of MDF so it will hide most of these pieces. Using a piece of wood from my daughter's bed frame, I had to find the center point of where the keyboard tray sits. I made a line from the center and drew a guided line across the board, then screwed it in place with some wood screws. Now moving on to the joystick part. Firstly, I traced the border of where the brackets will be, so the joysticks will need to sit inside the area. I printed out the Astro City joystick layout and stuck it down with some Pritt stick. Using a hammer and screwdriver, I lightly hammered each center point of the button and joystick, which helped guide me where I would need to drill. Using the stepper drill, I drilled out all the marks on the board. That being said, I did need to refine some of the holes as they were slightly small in some areas. Here I'm just fitting each button to make sure they fit in place. So there was one fault I found when fitting the joystick in place, and that was these wooden frames. I had to remove them and replace them with plastic brackets instead, which I think worked out a lot better. And finally screwing it down and adding all the buttons. For the start, select and hotkey buttons for the first and second player, I decided to add 5 smaller 28mm buttons in the center. For wiring, here I'm just making sure I have enough space to encase it all in. Now for the monitor casing. Measuring everything, I also had to make sure I include a hole for the center so the monitor can move up and down and rotate. I've also learnt that if you clamp a board on the side of the cutting line, you'll get a straighter line, although it didn't work out as well for me, which I found weird. Slotting the board in, it did seem to fit fine, but I did actually make a few adjustments for the center hole, as I did find issues after rotating the screen with the wires plugged in. To protect the PC stand even further, I added these slats between the stand so it would have less room for it to move. Now for the back case. I was actually planning to add a door where you will be able to access the back easily, but seeing as all the functionality is on the monitor, you shouldn't need to access the back. So instead I opted to encase it as one big board instead. And after a few more adjustments off screen, I can call it done. The screen rotates fine. And the keyboard is easily accessible with the joystick just above it. Now to wrap it. I found this grey wrap used for countertops and cupboards for your kitchen, but this means taking everything apart to get a cleaner finish. Again, I'm no expert at doing this, and I did have some issues when applying the wrap. First of all, this wrap is really terrible. It was just sticky paper, so it would just tear if I pull the paper too hard. So I had to be really careful when it came to doing the corners, so I will not be including this in the description below. Also, the adhesive was really terrible. It will peel open with the slightest of touch. I had to resort to using some black gaffer tape to secure it down. For the joysticks, it was just simply finding these holes with a craft knife and cutting round the holes. And with those buttons in, we're pretty much to the finish line. All there is to do is screw the rest of the panels, plug in all the buttons, keyboard and mouse, add in a hole for the power cable. I used the USB hub to power the mouse and keyboard, joystick and USB macro keys. I also tried to add some LED strips to make the arcade pop, but you'll find out later, which I really should have known, this wouldn't really work. They have these anchor points which you'll screw in and simply attach the LED strips to those anchor points. It also comes with a remote to control the light's mood and colour, which actually looks pretty cool. So this is the USB macro keys I mentioned earlier. More on this later, but I just stuck it down with some double-sided tape. Just to add some additional versatility, I printed these controller holders, which I screwed in the side of the case. It can hold your PlayStation or Xbox controller, or even a pair of headphones. For the plugs, I printed out these holders, which again I stuck on with some double-sided tape. And once that was done, I can finally call it done.
This video is sponsored by PCBWay. If you have a project in mind and require custom PCBs or 3D printing services, then PCBWay will help you out with that. They have an easy website to upload your projects to. Just wait for their team of experts to review your circuit board or 3D files, and you'll receive your projects with absolute professionalism. I've used PCBWay for my 3D prints and they've come out amazingly. So if you have a project in mind, please check out PCBWay. Now back to the video.
This PC is just an ordinary PC. Just turn it on and customize it however you like. I managed to boot Launchbox Big Box mode on Windows Startup, so after a few seconds you'll be greeted with your game collection. This PC also came with a keyboard and mouse, which not the most comfortable to use because of the drawer door. My thoughts here is that you shouldn't need to use it often, as it should be thought of as an arcade first. That being said, you'll be able to use it as a regular PC and watch your favourite YouTuber.
Right to the arcades. My weekends were filled with light gun games such as Time Crisis.
With the USB macro keys, you can map the keys to a hotkey. The wheel turns the volume up and down.
Filled with mobile ports that are ported to from consoles.
Clicking it will mute the sound.
All the same.
The left button rotates the screen and the middle button returns it to its default orientation.
Nor did they make a DIY controller for the Bishi Bashi. This is future me. Before I get bombarded with comments, there is actually an uptown centre, and it does
and the right button just changes the LED colour. I didn't really know what to use the key for. As well as rotating the screen, you can also move it up and down. I found that this was useful for web browsing. You can also tilt the screen ever so slightly. And now onto the LED light. Once I plug it in and turn on the LED lights and turn off the lights, sadly you can barely see it, which makes obvious sense as the whole case is made from wood and it's pretty much sealed off. Although you can see a bit of light coming from the power cord hole, and suffice to say, I'll be removing it. But enough of me rambling, check out some gameplay. And just to note, the middle button is mapped to the escape key to exit the game. As I said, the main feature of this arcade is that you can rotate the screen. And luckily, Launchbox has some filters to filter out vertical shooters. Not only that, but Launchbox will automatically rotate the screen for you. But as you can see, the game also includes these side bezels, which really squishes the screen. To remove the bezels, just navigate to RetroArch, Overlays, Game Bezels, select the emulator, mine being MAME, find the game's config and image, and simply delete it. And when you launch back into the game, you'll be able to play at full screen. Launchbox can also hold your Steam games as well, so you'll be able to navigate and play all your games through Launchbox. Not a great way to show it, but here I'm playing 2 players on the joysticks. Obviously, you'll be able to use your own controllers to play games.
Who are they? They're not splitters. More of them!
And lastly, you can add peripherals to it. Here I'm using my Sinden light guns. On the side there's a handy spare USB port. I plugged in my Batasera image on the USB and told Windows to boot from the USB. And just like that, it launches into Batasera with a working Sinden light gun. Here are my final thoughts. I think overall I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. The overall look is what I did envision, although some of the finishing could be neater, such as the grey wrapping. Also, the LED lights did not work as I expected it would. Apart from that, I'm pretty happy with the end product. Cost wise, I may have gone a bit overboard in some areas. Here's a quick rundown of what I spent. And before you can say, why don't you just buy a Raspberry Pi and be done with it? But remember, these all-in-one PCs not only comes with the PC, also comes with speakers and a monitor. On top of that, you'll be able to play your Steam games as well. So this still outperforms the best Raspberry Pi out there. But do temper your expectations when it comes to performance. Most AAA games would only run at low settings. I tried to run Street Fighter 6 on this and didn't even get past the loading screen. But if you want a better performing PC, I'd probably stay away from these PC as you only go as far with these integrated graphics. As I said earlier, the keyboard and mouse can be a little uncomfortable to use as your wrists are resting on the drawer door. But as I said, this should be an arcade first PC. It launches into Launchbox Big Box mode, which means you shouldn't need to touch the keyboard and mouse. And on the topic of Launchbox, for those that are unaware of Launchbox, is a front-end app like RetroArch that organises, download game covers and playing all your emulators and PC games. It's one of my favourite apps that I use to play my retro games. I'll leave a link in the description below for more information. And lastly, what I want to mention is giving these PCs a new lease on life. This is a refurbished Windows 10 Dell PC, which was heavily discounted due to it being so old. But it's the potential with what you can do with it that counts. I'd say if you're planning on something like this, look into picking up one of these PCs instead of running straight to buying a new PC or even a Raspberry Pi. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed building it. If you made it this far, I was actually planning on selling this. So if you're interested, I will unfortunately only be offering it to those in the UK. So if you are interested, please send me a DM. And thanks again for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers!